Is your leadership style rigid? Well, your project reality keeps shifting? Well, we'll show you how to flex. Hello and welcome back to the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com. I'm Cornelius Fichtner. This is episode 527. Thank you so much for being here with us today. As always, you probably know the drill here. The video episode of this program is available at pm-podcast.com/527 or pm-podcast.com/YouTube. And if you're on YouTube, please like, please subscribe. I really appreciate it. Also, are you preparing for the PMP exam? Then here is my PMP exam simulator for you. It has close to 2,000 realistic exam questions with thousands of happy students that resulted in a 4.9 out of 5-star rating on Google. Take a look. It's at pmexamsimulator.com. Well then, projects rarely unfold exactly as planned, and uncertainty can derail even the most disciplined schedule. And that's why today we are exploring flexible project leadership. This is an approach that equips project leaders to better grasp context, pivot the style, and keep outcomes on track without abandoning core values. Our guide is Kevin Eikenberry, the Chief Potential Officer of the Kevin Eikenberry Group. Over 3 decades, he has coached leaders in more than 50 countries, penned bestsellers like Remarkable Leadership and The Long Distance Leader, and now ranks among the world's top leadership thinkers. His book, Flexible Leadership, is here on the right. He joins us to share how flexible leaders navigate volatility, balance empathy with results, and build habits that let teams thrive under pressure. And here he is joining us from Indianapolis. Hello, Kevin. Thank you.
Here I am, Cornelius. Thank you for that lovely introduction, and thank you for having me on the show. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. It's wonderful what you learn when you look at somebody's LinkedIn bio.
True. Well, if people have done a good job of writing them, right?
Indeed, yes. That's what we have marketing people for these days. We are live on Facebook, YouTube, X, LinkedIn. If you are joining us live, then please use the chat and send over your questions for Kevin or for me, and we will happy to answer them here on the program right away. Now, what did I say in the opening? It seems like, uncertainty seems to be constant, and that's where we're starting. Facing constant uncertainty. It seems to be the everyday reality of modern projects. Kevin, what is it about today's work environment that seems to make uncertainty feel simply ever present for project managers these days?
Well, I could probably start with one word, a word that 5 years ago we'd never heard of. And then it changed our worlds in a weekend, right? That's COVID, right? We could take that one simple example. And we went from 80 years of seeing how work was done. And societally, we understood that work was done 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. Like if you didn't work in that mode, you explained immediately when you at the cocktail party about how your work was different than that, because everyone was based on that model. And then over the course of a very short period of time, depending on where you lived in the world, the way we thought about work, the way we talked about work, the way we did work, where we did work, all changed. And so that's just certainly the biggest example of how uncertainty is now all around us. And so even though organizations are saying in many cases we're bringing people back, people aren't necessarily coming back. And bigger organizations are tending to wanting people to come back more than people in smaller organizations. And as project leaders, you might be leading teams, some of whom are back in the office and some of whom are not, some of whom want to be in the office, some of whom don't. And again, all of this is just one aspect of the uncertainty that we live with. We've got geopolitical uncertainty. We've got uncertainty in terms of the push and pull of what we're trying to accomplish with projects, the amount of change that's happening in the world, and we could go on and on. And so for us to be effective as project leaders today, we must, number one, acknowledge that uncertainty, Cornelius, because, what I find, and the research says, that people deal with uncertainty in one of three ways. They either try to ignore it, deny it, plow through it, or they go into ostrich mode, right? And try to just try to forget all about it and try to stay out of it. And they become immobilized by it and take no heed. Or they wait. They're not waiting because they want to wait. They're waiting to find the best answer. And none of those approaches are what's going to help us navigate that uncertainty best. And yet most of the time, that's what we try to do, is one of those things.
Mm-hmm. Some people might call this chaotic. This is a chaotic feeling situation. If I remember correctly, in your book, you say, don't call it chaotic, call it complex. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you did. I mean,
what helps? What is it that helps us if we just reframe it and we're not saying, that this is chaotic versus no, this is complex, but not chaotic necessarily.
Well, here's the thing. The thing is that there's a fundamental difference between, and we're going to talk about the framework that this is based in a little bit later, I know. But when we think that we're in chaos, then everyone throws their arms up and we have to take action. So if we go back to 5 years ago, when wherever you live, when the government said you're going to send people home and work from home, that was a chaotic moment. And in that moment, as a leader or project leader, the best approach for you to take is to really, truly take the lead and say, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And people are willing and ready for you to take the lead and really, truly direct in those moments of chaos, because someone needs to. But the chaos doesn't last very long. And very quickly, once we're past the chaos moment, once we're past the hurricane, once we're past the COVID shutdown, then we're just in a world that's complex. And there are a lot of things that are unknown, and we have to figure things out without having all of the information, and all of the pieces are connected, but we can't tell how they're connected. And we really need to move into trying things, piloting things, testing things more. But when we're in true chaos, we need someone to just say, let's go do something. But once we realize that truly we're in a complex context, what we need to do is look more at what do we know and what do we don't know, and how do we live with what we don't know. And that doesn't necessarily immediately mean to take action, but it means to start to think about how might we test and try things that might help us get a little closer to understanding the situation.
Let's bring this back to your book, Flexible Leadership, your framework for flexible leadership. How does flexible leadership then help me in these in these complex areas? Yes, I did that intentionally, obviously.
Yes, I know you did. Well, so let's start here, because there's a question that you as a listener or viewer might be asking yourself. Well, I kind of think the idea of flexible sounds good, Kevin, but aren't we really supposed to be stable and consistent and solid? And aren't folks supposed to know exactly where we stand as a leader? And how do I juxtapose that with being flexible? And so my answer to that is, and it's the first place that we have to start, and that is, in other words, if I want to sell you on the idea of being flexible, you have to understand what I mean by that and what I don't mean by that. So think about a mature tree. I happen to be able to see one out my window when I look past this camera. But if you can all get a picture of a tree in your mind's eye, and you would say, well, that tree is stable, it's sturdy, it's not moving, it's consistent. And why is that true? It's true because it's rooted. And as a leader, we should be rooted. As a project leader, we should be rooted in what the objectives of this project are, in our values, in the core principles of projects, on the principles of human and group dynamics and human behavior. Like, those things aren't changing. And yet, if you look at that same tree, if there's any breeze or wind at all, you will see that that tree that you just said was stable, consistent, and solid is also flexing in the breeze. And so while we as leaders should be stable and consistent in our values, in our purpose, in our principles, we should be flexible in our approach. So when we're talking about being flexible, we're talking about being flexible in how we lead projects. Not what the project is or what we stand for or what the purpose of the organization or the project is, but rather how we lead it. That's the piece that we're talking about. And so then how we lead, as I've just hinted, is slightly or should be, excuse me, should be different if the situation is chaotic versus if it's complex. And that's part of the idea of this whole piece is we have to have an intention to say that flexing is good, excuse me, is a good idea. And then we must understand context, which is what we're starting to talk about. And then we have to know, based on context, how do we actually flex? That's the approach that we call the flexible leadership approach.
Excellent. Let's open up your book and go from, we're facing constant uncertainty here to these 3 words, or rather concepts that I have picked from your book: mindset, skill set, habit set. Okay. What do you mean when you talk about you need to align these 3: mindset, skill set, habit set?
Well, let's start, and I it's been a while since I've opened the PMBOK, right? But let's just start there and say, that for people on your project teams, there are skills that you need them to have. And you want them to have those skills and be able to exhibit those skills. And yet, if they don't see the value in those skills, if they don't see that those things will be helpful to them, it doesn't matter if you can intellectually teach them those skills. The mindset, our beliefs, our viewpoint, our perspective, our mindset must match our skill set. And if it doesn't, the mindset's going to win. And so just as a project leader saying, I'm going to teach my folks the skill that they need for this, unless they understand how that fits in, why it matters, and how it aligns with their beliefs, it doesn't matter if you can intellectually teach them the skill, they're not going to apply it. So that's mindset, skill set. And then you don't teach people a new skill around your projects. You want them to do that skill, right? There's a difference between knowing something and doing something. And that's the difference between skill set and habit set. And if you've got the mindset in alignment with the skill set, then you have a chance that people will go actually apply the skill. I know that we're going to end this conversation by talking about application. Nothing matters at the end of this conversation if you don't take some action. And nothing matters if you're reading or following our ideas in flexible leadership unless you take action on them. Like, I could teach you how to flex in a given context, but that's different than you actually flexing. So these 3 things have to align in order for us to ultimately get the results that we're looking for, whether it's on our project or whether it's in becoming a more effective leader.
All right. Habit set. Where have you seen habit set trip up leaders who otherwise have maybe a strong mindset and a strong skill set and who do things right, but their habit set is tripping them up?
Well, habits are one of the most powerful forces for us as humans, right? Like, habits allow us to do things without thinking, and so that we can move through things faster and it takes us less energy. If we had to plot out and think about all of the steps we take from when we get out of bed until we get ready to go to work that we do on autopilot, it would take us a tremendous amount of mental energy, and we wouldn't do any of those things as quickly. So habits are critical. We all know that, but they are automatic. We do them without thinking, and that's what makes them powerful, and that's what makes them hard to break. So as a leader, you can say, hey, I now realize I understand that flexibility will help me be more successful in an uncertain and complex world. Mindset. I now have some skills to help me unpack that and do that. But the problem is I have habits of doing it the same way every time. Like, here's the deal. Cornelius, there are 25 different ways to tie shoes.
Okay.
And chances are everyone, I know me, and I'm guessing everyone else who's listening to or watching us ties them the same way every time. Sometimes people say, well, I use two because I'll tie them or then I'll double tie them. But even if you double tie them, you probably stopped to think, I'm going to double tie it, right? So at most, you're doing 2 of 25. Now, you might not even know there's 25. If you don't know there's more than 2, you can't do them, right? But the thing is, some of those other knots might be more effective to you in some situations. But unless you stop to apprise yourself of that, think about that, consider those options, you're going to do what? What comes naturally? What's on autopilot? So how does our habit set mess us up as leaders? Well, it locks us into doing what we're used to. It locks us into doing what we've done repeatedly. It locks us into the identity we've taken as a project leader. And so if you've done some sort of assessment, whether it's DISC or Myers-Briggs or StrengthsFinder, or you've done some other sort of project leadership, project management style assessment that says your tendencies are to lead in this way, that's fine. But tendency is not identity. And what most people do is they move from that tendency and strip the rest of the nuance of the model out and say, well, this is how I do it. And once it's your identity, Cornelius, you're nodding. I think you're with me. It's incredibly hard to change a habit.
Mm-hmm. Let's go to mindset, because people often talk about mindset shifts. And I'd like to make this personal, because you are a leader, you have your own company, you lead people. Was there a particular mindset shift that you had to go through in order to grow as a leader yourself?
Oh, sure. Lots of them. And one of them is yes. I didn't mean to I didn't think you're going to make me bare my soul on this show, Cornelius. But no, let me say, in all seriousness,
Just a tiny
I
little.
think that I don't think I'm unusual in this particular regard. That and maybe it's more so for me because of what I do, right? Because I spend a lot of time helping other leaders improve, get better, make wiser decisions, etc. That you can come to a place where you think you largely have it figured out. And given that people come to me and ask me questions about this stuff, it would be very easy for me to say, well, this is it. You have come to the mountain, and here's Kevin. And if I am there, or when I'm leaning there, I am no longer serving people, because I have to be continuing to be on the journey of growing too. And if I'm not, I can't serve others, whether they're on my team or whether they're our clients. And so the mindset shift is to realize that leadership is complex and that leadership is a journey. There is not a destination here. It's getting on a path to continuing to get better, and the good news is, as we get better at it, we get better outcomes for our organizations. We help the folks that we lead, whether it's as a capital L leader or a project leader, we help them get better results. We help them be more effective. And ultimately, as we become a better leader, we become a better, more fully functioning human. And so the mindset that says, I've got this figured out, or I'm good enough, or it's fine, will stop us. It will stop us, and it will not just retard our growth. Because think about this for a second, Cornelius. I posed this to a group in a keynote yesterday. Think about how you were leading 5 years ago, right? You were leading in a certain way 5 years ago. Since then, the world has changed a lot. I think we can all agree with that. The world is continuing to change around us. If we are not changing as a leader, if we have stopped our growth and development, if we have said it's good enough, if we've said this is how I lead, if that's where we are, is it a good bet that the changes in the world are conspiring to make us more effective? That is not a good bet. I am not taking that bet, right? So if we're not adjusting, changing, flexing, growing, developing as the world is flexing, changing, being even more complex, harder to get our arms around, then how can we possibly be serving our clients, be serving our team, be serving our outcomes in the best possible way? It's just not possible.
Thank you very much for bearing your soul. We are moving on from mindset, skill set, and habit set to map your context. It's something that you help us do in your book. And you have a tool for that, which is called the Cynefin
framework.
Now I've forgotten what it's called.
It's the Cynefin
quadrant.
He was so worried about getting the word Cynefin pronounced correctly.
Yes, no, I've forgotten what it's called.
You got the hard part.
Cynefin framework. There we go. The Cynefin framework.
So I love the last slide because you think about you call it mapping the context. And here's the question I give to people often. I say,
wait, this one here you like? That one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So just leave that there for just a sec.
Of course.
For all of you, just think about this for a second. If I'm going to plop you out in the wilderness and I say, I want you to get yourself back to civilization, the first thing you're going to say you want is a map, just like that person's holding up there on the wall. Because I need to know where I am so I can decide where and how I want to proceed. That's what a map does for us, right? And so now you put the Cynefin framework back up if you want. And that is what I would propose to you is our map as a leader. And this Cynefin framework is not my work. There's a gentleman named Dave Snowden who created and has continued to create and update this sense-making framework for a long time. And what I have tried to do is take Dave's work and make it make sense for us on a more individual, day-to-day, situation-to-situation use. It was really created for big picture kinds of things. So what I'm trying to do here is give us all a map to say, if this is where I'm at, this is how I ought to lead. So you were talking earlier about chaos and complexity. They're right here on this framework, and you can see on the bottom left there, if the map says our context is chaotic, then we need to take action right now because we don't know what's going to work. We need to do something, and we need to do something now, and then we can sense what happened, and then we can respond from that. But the first thing we need to do is take action. But if we lead all of the time from that place, then we're truly leading from a truly command and control space. And I'm guessing all of you would say that's not necessarily serving me best. Now, I said earlier, there may be moments, there may be 4 or 5 moments in your career as a project manager when things are truly chaotic and you need to unilaterally decide something when no one knows what's going on, but something's got to happen. That's chaos. But if you lead like that all the time, it's not going to go so well. If the context is clear, everybody knows all the pieces. Like all the knowns are known. Best practices reign. Cause and effect is clear. And when all of that is true, there are processes, and the processes will work unfailingly. This is the map we'd like to be in, right? This is the place we'd like to be in. And there's an awful lot of leaders, including project leaders, that lead as if that were the case. This can also lead to command and control. But just like, I've been down this road. I've done 704 projects, and this is what we do every time. Always reigns here. And you will probably, if you've got hair of anywhere close to the color of mine, hint, it's not blonde. That means that chances are you don't find yourself in that context as much as you used to. More often you find yourself in a context where the answers might be out there, but you don't have them all, and they're not all known. And we may need other expertise than we might have needed before. And we need to sense the situation and analyze it, not just immediately respond. And we need to think about finding good practices, because we can't probably find the best practice, or the best practice we used to have doesn't isn't really going to work anymore, or we try to shoehorn that practice in and it doesn't go so well.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can go back around to the other part of the question you asked earlier about the complexity. Like, we have to probe first because we can't even see what there is to see. You can't unravel the yarn all at once. You have to keep backing up and checking it out. And everything is interconnected. If you've ever been in a situation where you're looking at a decision you made 6 months ago, Cornelius, and you're saying, man, well, if I'd have known then what I know now, we'd have made different choices. Chances are the situation was complex. Right. And the dominoes didn't fall the way you thought they'd fall because the situation was unordered. Right. So if you look at this framework from the left side versus the right side. Right. So on the right side, this is all a world where things are ordered. Like, I can take this laptop that I'm using for this conversation apart. Someone could take it apart, not me. Someone could take it apart and put it back together and it would work again. That's an ordered system. A system that's unordered, a system that's complex, which is much of what we live in now, is like mayonnaise. Once you've put mayonnaise together, you can't take it apart and then get it back together. It's an unordered system. Right? It's more of a biological system than a mechanical system. And we need to start to realize that a lot of the challenges that we face, a lot of the uncertainty we face is because things are complex. There's not a single perfect answer. So that's maybe more than you wanted, but it's a good start for us to be able to see this map, to look at the situations we're in and say, how should I be leading based on that? Rather than, what do I always do?
How do you recommend to your clients, consulting clients, that they use this framework? Is this something that you use to plan your projects and your activities? Or is this literally something that you develop as a mental framework, and at any given moment you can pretty much call up this map and go, I am here, therefore this approach is most likely the more appropriate one to go for?
I think first of all, it's a great question. And second of all, I think it's more of a both and than an either or. It's not, should I use it at the beginning or should I use it during, but it's but it would probably serve us to think about what's the situation or context that this project is fitting into? How is it going to interact with all the other stuff around it? What are the things we know or don't know about it even before we start, before we get to our Gantt chart, before we get to our milestones? Like, how does this, what is the system that this is going into? And what does that tell us about the knowns and unknowns before we even start? I think doing that on the front end will be incredibly useful. And I think from one day to the next, from one project update meeting to the next, there will be situations where we say, well, what should I do right now? Here's the easiest way I can say how to use this on a ongoing basis. And this example, I think, proves that all of us, number one, are capable of flexing, Cornelius, and that we've all done it. Okay. And you didn't have to know the Cynefin framework to have done this. Here's what happens. Someone comes to you with a problem or a situation, asking for your advice, wise counsel, or direction, or you're just thinking about a situation in your head. And before you answer yourself or others, you say to yourself or say out loud, it depends. Right then, stop. Because what it depends on is the context. So ask yourself, well, what does it depend on? Because basically when you're saying that, you're saying, well, if it's like this, I should do it this way. If it's like this, I should do it this way. If it's like this, we would make this choice, right? Which is fundamentally what this is saying. What this is saying is consider your context and then take actions that give you the best chance for success. Even though there's still going to be uncertain. There's no guarantee, right? And maybe that next step will then be what you would naturally do, your natural habit, or it might be something that's slightly different. slightly in tension from the way you would normally do it, or make you a little bit uncomfortable, but you still feel like it's the best way to do it. When you find yourself in that moment of it depends, and you stop and you consider what it depends on, you're reading a map. And then you're saying, based on that, which way should I go? That's at the heart. That's in the moment of what flexible leadership looks like.
All right. In addition to this tool right here, the Cynefin framework, your book also introduces us to flexors. And I believe you have 19 of them.
Yeah,
in
we
the
don't
book.
need to talk about 19, but we can talk about
No,
the
that would be too much. And let's start with the definition.
Yeah.
In your own words, what exactly is a flexor?
Well, it's funny because you use that picture that has muscle and a flexor.
Yes.
Because the word flexor in the English language is about muscles, right? And yet I'm using it in a new way. What I'm suggesting to us is that, and I've already given you all an example of one. It's not one of the 19 in the book. The 19 in the book are all useful, but to become a flexible leader is not about knowing all 19 or remembering all 19. It's about understanding this concept, everybody. And earlier I said, well, is a tree consistent and stable, or is a tree flexible? And the answer is it's both. So when you look at a flexor, both ends of the flexor are both truths, but we don't frame them as an or, that we have to choose between this or this, but rather that both can be true and both are true. And where we need to be on that continuum is it needs to be flexed based on the context. So context, map, how then do I do it? The flexors help us think about, well, which direction should I shift on those flexors, managing the tension between the two ends of the flexor in order for me to be most effective in leading in this moment. Because most of us tend to be at one end or the other of a flexor, and the extremes of the flexors are rarely the right answer. So let me give you a simple example. And this is an example of a flexor, right? There are some leaders, some project leaders, who are very detail oriented, and details are important in projects without question. And there are some leaders, project leaders, who are more big picture focused, right? And you probably have seen leaders that you could already given names to say, well, yeah, they're detail oriented, they're big picture oriented. That's a flexor. And here's the thing, you probably can think of examples of people being way out on the ends of either one of those and having it be a problem. And it doesn't take you long to figure out that if I'm always on the details, I may be missing the big picture. Or maybe I have a team of people who are detail oriented and I need to be bringing the big picture, even if I'm detail oriented. That's me needing to flex because we as a project team need the big picture. Or maybe you are a big picture person and the team needs you to get into the details a little bit more. That's the idea of a flexor, and that happens to be one of the 19.
Mm-hmm. From your experience as you have introduced this concept to your customers, project managers, and clients around the world, what flexor do leaders usually struggle with the most? And why do they struggle with that particular flexor?
I don't know that I can say that there is one that is the most common, but I can tell you the one that might be the most overarching. And the one that's the most overarching is what I call the outcomes others flexor. Mm-hmm. So I believe that leadership the job of a leader is to reach valuable outcomes with and through others. And that is how I define leadership, that leadership is ultimately about outcomes and others. And yet many leaders and many assessments of leaders tend to bucket us as either being about outcomes, results, tasks, right? Goals, or about others, relationships, trust, communication. And the struggle here is that some leaders feel like, well, I'm a people-focused leader. Well, I'm a results-driven leader. Now, first of all, making those two statements have already put us in a box, because that's how I lead. That's who I am, right? We are more than a label. And yet this overriding one sits on top of many of the rest of the flexors, if you would. And so I would suggest that all leaders need to be focused on both outcomes and others. But at moments, we might need to lean one way more than the other. But this particular one is often a stumbling block for folks, simply because so many of the things we've read, so many of the assessments we may have taken might tend to make us think that, well, I'm task-oriented or I'm people-oriented. And so then, therefore, I'm focused more on outcome, or I'm focused more on others.
Mm-hmm. Am I getting this right in my general understanding from our conversation so far? We use the flexors in order to guide our understanding in what's right at any given moment in terms of leadership, right? Do I focus on the outcome? Do I focus on others? Do I delegate? Am I looking at the big picture? Am I looking at the details? And depending on the situation of where I am in the Cynefin framework,
Yep.
I need to shift.
Yeah.
And so, how do I know that I need to shift?
Well, so even the way that you said it. So yes, I do believe that you understand what we're talking, that you do get what we're talking about, that you're with me. And yet notice the language. Do I do this or I do this? And that's not it, right? It ultimately it's sometimes I need to do things. Sometimes I need to delegate them. And it's not a light switch, right? So in this situation with this person that's in front of me at this point on the project, there's 12 decision points here. Given all of that, and maybe some of the stuff I don't know, so maybe this is more complicated than it normally would be. Normally, what I might say is, well, in this case, I ought to be delegating. But this may be more complicated than you or more complex than you normally. So you stop and you say, well, what does it depend on? And you think about it a little bit more. Say, maybe I need to lean a little bit more toward doing this right now versus delegating this. Even though I know that really I ought to be delegating, really I know that, that isn't necessarily perhaps my tendency, but right now that's a better option. Or right now what the team needs me to do is roll up my sleeves and help them. Not forever, but for the next 6 hours or 6 days, right?
All right. Thank you very much. At this point, we're moving a little bit outside of the book, because as we were preparing this, in addition to sharing the book with me, thank you very much, you also sent me 2 articles. And I thought they were so great, I felt we have to have at least one question for each of these articles that we talk about. The first article is titled, Why Leaders Need to Do Plausible Cause Analysis. Hard tool, great. Everybody likes hard tools. Why do you prefer a plausible cause analysis over a traditional root cause approach when we are in uncertain situations?
Yeah. I mean, root cause analysis is awesome, right? We all need to know how to do it.
And
especially when the context is clear, root cause analysis is incredibly illuminating. And we ought to be able to do root cause analysis, but sometimes there's just not enough certainty for us to be able to get to root causes. And what we need to get to is, what are things that it might be? Like, I can't even know, but what I know is I ought to examine what the possibilities or the plausible causes are. And if I can stack up the 6 or 7 plausible causes to this, I don't even know how likely it is that it could be any of these, but I know it could be any of these things. Then I can say, which actions could I take that would have more impact on more of those possible causes? Right? When the world is clear and it's straightforward and the systems are ordered and we can do root cause analysis, and we don't have to put people and culture and all this other stuff and geopolitical stuff into all that, like customer preference, we don't have all that stuff in there, then we can do root cause analysis, and we absolutely should do 5 whys and all that stuff, like 100%. And again, I'm not saying don't do root cause analysis. I'm saying it's not the only tool in your toolkit. Mm-hmm. I'm saying that plausible cause analysis says, well, what could it be? Well, it could be this, 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 and it could be this. Okay. Given that it could be one or more of those 6 things, what could we do that might have a positive impact on the most of those plausible causes? Or what 2 or 3 things could we now do that might help us address those, even if we don't know which one it is, because we may not be able to find out which one it is. So it helps us plan a strategy moving forward in a world that's more uncertain.
Mhm. So, am I interpreting this correctly then, that you're saying that, yeah, root cause analysis is fine, but if you do a root cause analysis, you end up with one cause that you're saying this is the root, but you keep forgetting that these things over here, they could also impact this. So it's not just this one single thing, it's multiple things that are plausible to be the cause of our problems here.
Or the problem is so complex that we can't get it down to one.
Doesn't have a single
I think
root.
ultimately that's it, right? Like doing root cause analysis is great, and yet we all know that there are situations where, okay, that's helpful, but is there really just one? Or it could be this, it could be this, it could be this plausible cause. We can't know for sure, or the time and effort that it would take to absolutely get to knowing which one it is not worth the effort. So now, if it could be among this limited number plausible causes, what actions could we take that would have a positive impact on the most of those plausible causes? And often there's something that we could do that would impact multiple of those. That's a more highly leveraged choice to make in an uncertain world.
All right. That's it. That's our time for the plausible cause analysis. We're moving on to article number 2, the role of confidence in uncertainty. The role of confidence in uncertainty. Why is balancing confidence with humility so vital when leading through uncertainty?
Well, so let's just say 2 things. Number 1 is you could think about confidence and humility perhaps as a flexor, right? Some people like to think, well, how can I be humble if I'm confident? And I would suggest that you can be both. And that when we can recognize that I can be confident in what I do know and what we're able to try, and humble enough to know that it might not work, right? Why confidence is so important in uncertainty is that if we don't have some level of confidence in our approach, in the how, then we might do what we said at the beginning. We might be immobilized and do nothing, or we might go into denial and ignore the context and just plow forward. We could try to do those things, or we could try to over analyze. And so by having a level of confidence in our ability to try things, in our ability to do plausible cause analysis, and our ability to consider the context of our situation and know where we sort of are on the map. Once we don't have to have confidence in the outcome to have confidence enough in our process to know that we're giving ourselves a shot to have good success. So that's why confidence is important in the face of uncertainty, because if we don't have some level of confidence and don't have some sort of mindset and thought process and skill set to move forward with, we will be stuck. We will be immobilized. We will be in denial. We will overanalyze, and we won't make any progress at all.
As a leader, so we're still talking about confident yet humble, right? So that there's the yet is sort of the and thing that we talked
100%.
about with the flexors. Is there a point when me being humble undermines my authority as a project leader? How do I make sure that doesn't happen?
Well, so let's go back and think about if the situation is clear. There are leaders that will be self-deprecating to a fault, that will be humble to a fault, and they won't want to make a decision because they'll want the team. Always let the team make the call. Always lean back to the team, and that can look like humility. But there are times if the way forward is clear, if this is a path that we've been down before and there's nothing new here, then we don't need to go gather 31 pieces of expertise for the rest of the team. We need to go, right? The problem is that too often people that go too far on the other end try to make decisions and assume everything is a clear context and that they can just go forward all the time. And that leads to different kinds of problems, right? So can we be too humble? Can we be too much of a servant project leader? I believe we can be. Even though in general, the idea of being a servant leader sounds pretty good and is pretty strong, we can lean too far that direction to the point that we're not making decisions. We're not allowing our experience to assist the team in their success.
All right. We are ready to close this out. And while it was fun to talk about those 2 articles in the end and bring in these kind of insights as well from you, let's close it out with flexible leadership. So other than reading your book, obviously, and learning about it from the book, what is the first move, the first step that you recommend that our audience, project leaders, should make right this afternoon in order to start leading more flexibly? Where would you send them?
Well, the very first thing is you have to believe that flexing will help you. You have to recognize that however effective you've been as a leader, there are times when it hasn't gone as well as you'd like it to go, and that you've done it 83 times and it went pretty well about 75 of the 83. What about the 8? Right? So the first thing is deciding that you're willing to flex and that flexing will serve you and your team to greater levels. And then the second thing is remember that it depends point. The next time that you're thinking about a situation, thinking about a decision, have been asked about what to take direction to go next, and you say to yourself, well, it depends, stop. Because that it depends moment is a moment for you to stop yourself from going into autopilot and instead considering the context. You don't have to remember Cynefin to do this. What you need to do is remember that, okay, well, let's look at the possibilities here. Let's look at the plausible causes of the situation. And from that contextual viewpoint, that more complete perceptive view, make a conscious choice about what to do next.
I was just thinking, everybody likes hard tools like the Cynefin framework or the plausible cause analysis. So here we're talking about habit set, mindset shifts. Is there a way that I can, as I'm starting on this journey to flexible leadership, how I can track my progress, how I can hold myself accountable to actually do this? Have you found something in that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we want to do here is we want to, we've learned a lot in the last 20 years about how habits form, the way habits work for us as human beings. The work of James Clear, certainly, and Charles Duhigg, The Power of Habits and Atomic Habits are 2 examples of what we've learned and brought into the popular press about how habits work and how we can adjust them. And one of those things is to recognize our triggers, right? And so that's what I would suggest with this. It depends. So one thing you could do is you could say, well, how many times a day do I think about what it depends on before I make a decision and do a count, right? And that would be a simple thing that you could do. Like, am I stopping and getting out of auto response? Or did I stop and get out of auto response today? How many times today did I do that? How many times did I consider my alternatives of how I move forward rather than just doing what was my first inclination, my natural inclination, my tendency, or my comfort, right? How often are we willing to do that? So one simple way in the time we have left to do that would be simply to think about making a tick mark for that every day. Put it in your planner, put it in whatever you're doing, whatever you're using, and see if you get at least 1 tick mark every day. That'd be a good start.
So, after Kevin and I hung up, I realized that I actually have a pretty good answer to the last question I asked. Remember, I asked, is there a way in which I can track my progress, in which I can hold myself accountable? And I realized if I want to change a habit of mine, I actually have a pretty decent way of doing this. So, I understand my current habit and I know the future habit where I want to go. And I have realized that on the way from A to B, I'm going to stumble, I'm going to fumble, there are going to be setbacks, and I learned not to worry about it. Instead, what I do is I just let things happen. And then as I'm leading my team, afterwards I realized, I fell back into the old habit. Afterwards, I realize that I did that. But over time, as things progress, the afterwards gets closer and closer and closer to the very moment when I should be applying the new habit. So over time, yes, I realize, yesterday I should have used my new habit, or an hour ago I should have used the new habit, or 5 minutes, or 10 seconds ago. And that's the moment when things start to switch for me, because next time that this happens, I realize a few seconds before the event that I'm going to fall back into my old habit. Let's make sure I'm using the new habit. Oh, this works for me. Don't worry about it. Reflect, realize that you're still using the old habit, and over time, the new habit will emerge and you will be able to apply it. Hope that helps. Lovely. Kevin, thank you for your time. Thank you for introducing us to all these beautiful concepts. I am always the person who learns the most out of these conversations here, and I hope that our audience agrees that this was a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me so much.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here today. Please do visit pm-podcast.com/527 for show notes, transcripts, and our email address is info@pm-podcast.com. If you are PMI certified, then you can earn PDUs for this interview, for listening or watching it. 0.75 PDU, most likely, in the Power Skills category. Check the website. We have a spreadsheet where I detail this information all the time. The book, once again, is called Flexible Leadership: Navigate Uncertainty and Lead with Confidence. Written by Kevin Eikenberry and is published by Matt Holt Books. It is 224 pages thick and obviously available from most large online bookshops. And finally, we have this. I planned for uncertainty. It arrived early and it asked for a change request. Until next time, everybody.